pick your timing and stick to it. Pick that schedule that you feel comfortable with and that core content you feel comfortable with, and just go with it, and go with the bare minimum when you're first starting out. You can always move up. But if you drop off without notice to your customers, they're going to wonder what happened. They're going to forget you exist.
Welcome to the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast, the podcast where we celebrate moms building businesses on their own terms. I'm your host, Angela Mishuli, and today's episode is a powerhouse of insights with the incredible Sarah Noel Block. We'll cover the benefits of creating a business that suits you, transitioning from side hustle to full-time, and marketing B2B and B2C content marketing. Sarah is going to guide us through crafting ideal customer avatars, dispelling content marketing myths, and tackling creator guilt. In this episode, you're going to discover the rules for irresistible offers, differentiate marketing strategy from content strategy, and uncover hidden opportunities with Sarah's quiz. So dive into email marketing, realistic content schedules, and magic of repurposing content with Sarah and I in this episode. Whether you're a solo mompreneur or part of a small team, Sarah's wisdom on AI tools like Toasty AI and Opus Clip will elevate your marketing game. So get ready for a concise, actionable episode to transform your approach to business and marketing. Grab your favorite drink, find a comfy spot, and let's dive into this enriching conversation with Sarah Noel Block, and help me welcome her to the podcast. I am so thrilled to have Sarah Block on the podcast today. Sarah, thank you for joining me. I cannot wait to dive into your expertise in content marketing and creating content. I'm excited about your expertise in helping small teams, especially, which many mom entrepreneurs have a solo team or a small team that they're just trying to maximize to do the best for their business. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, as a mom business owner myself, I completely get it.
Yeah.
It's hard, especially even when I was working in corporate, I worked from home with my kids. So
yeah,
I'm an expert at maneuvering that life.
right. I mean, but it's definitely, it's possible, it's doable. And I love demonstrating that with this podcast. And I love having guests like yourself on the show that can help us incorporate new strategies and have mindset shifts and really, not see it as daunting as it can really feel sometimes. And
Yeah.
so why don't you set the stage for our listeners on like your background? You mentioned that you used to be corporate and now you're a business owner. So tell us about that.
All right, let's dig in. So I'm the founder of Tiny Marketing, which I started full-time. It was a side hustle before during the pandemic when my kids went to virtual school, and I was like, I have enough clients to make up my salary. I might as well jump now because I need to figure out how to make this work. So that's how my business started. But before that, I was in corporate America in marketing leadership roles for 10 years, I think it was. And just trying to maneuver what it's like to, have kids and work and trying to make that work. So I was working a hybrid environment where I was partly working from home, trying to save some money on childcare costs, and partly in the office. It was really kind of them to let me do that back when hybrid wasn't a thing. But, it was a tough thing to adapt to. But once I got my flow, it was so worth it. Even just being able to be with them and manage my time with them. I feel like I'm a lot closer to them
Mhm.
because I got to have that experience.
Mhm. Yeah, I love to talk about, you know, I would never sell the lie that going from a corporate environment to being your own business owner or working at home is easy. It takes time to adjust,
Oh, it
but
does.
man, if you do give it time and create an environment and a system and boundaries that make it work for you, it takes some work and it takes some effort. But once you kind of let it the dust settle, I think
Yeah.
the benefits are, really tremendous to trying to be a parent and juggle, an employer's expectations with trying to be there for your children and your family in the way that you want to.
Yeah, and to set the stage for it. I mean, I mentioned that tiny marketing was a side hustle when I was working in corporate America because I always intended to have my own business
Oh, you did?
eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just scared. I was too scared to do that, which is
Right?
stupid because it's much more distributed income. So it's more stable than it was
Mhm.
working for corporate.
Ah.
But I mean, when it came down to it, because I was working in that way
Mhm.
for like I side hustled for like 15 years, it felt
Wow.
like a freaking vacation having my own business and being able to just work when my kids were at school instead of having to, do my side freelance projects during school, like parties my kids were going to, or at the sidelines in swim class.
Mhm.
Now I had a set period of time where I could work, and that was
Mhm.
just glorious.
Yeah, I know how that can feel for sure. So, talk about your expertise in content marketing. Do I have it right that it's more business to business marketing?
That's what I do. I work
Mhm.
primarily in B2B. Content marketing,
Mhm.
though, works for either.
Okay, I was gonna
For
ask you like what the difference is and
I love B2B because well, I've always worked in B2B and you have a very clear persona. You know exactly who you're talking
uh,
to and what their challenges are, what solutions
mhm.
they've tried before that didn't work. So it makes
Mhm.
it a lot easier to create content.
Hmm.
Where when you're doing B2C content, it's
Mhm.
a little bit more generalized and you're using more psychographics than
Mhm.
clear, like you might be targeting mom business owners, since
Mhm.
this is the podcast, that might be your target for who you're selling to.
Mhm.
But the difference between one mom business owner to another is greatly different. So it's a little bit
Right.
harder to do content marketing that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and, you have all the, create your ideal customer avatar and all that.
Oh, and I'm all
Or
for it. But
yeah.
the best way to do it, especially, well, for anybody, is to interview the people who you've worked with that you've loved working with,
Mhm.
because then you can understand what their specific challenges are
Mhm.
and you can start cloning them. You understand
Mhm.
what their challenges are. And it's very likely that people that would also need your service have the same challenges. So that's
Mhm.
the easiest way. And that would be the core of your content marketing
Mhm.
is answering those questions.
So, before we dive in further, I would like to, for anybody who's listening, give them an understanding of like what you mean when you say content marketing, because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about what it is. And so,
This show is content marketing. Content
right.
marketing is pretty much just marketing at this point
Mm-hmm.
because it's become so mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
It is anytime you're creating some value driven content. So,
Mm-hmm.
articles, social media posts, emails, podcasts, videos, all of that is content.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is pulling people through the sales cycle, getting
Mm-hmm.
them to discover you exist,
Mm-hmm.
helping them decide to put you on the short list for
Mm-hmm.
their solution,
Mm-hmm.
um, overcoming their objections and getting them to say yes to your offer. And you can
Yeah.
do all of that through content marketing. And it's basically like having a 24/7 salesperson.
Yeah. So, what are some of the misconceptions that you kind of think are out there that exist the most that maybe you could clear up for people about content marketing?
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record that there's one way to stay consistent. And
Right?
we were just talking about how difficult it is, especially if you are taking care of your kids and working at the same time, and you just have to like find the flow between those
Mhm.
two things. You don't have to be consistent in the way that we traditionally think of consistent. Like, I'm going to create this piece of content, whatever that is,
Mhm.
once a month, once a week, whatever it might
Mhm.
be. What you could do instead is think about a topic around your offer that you're trying to sell
Mhm.
and create content around that with like a capsule. So, for example, if you have we'll go with your ideal customer is a mom entrepreneur and you do email marketing for them, that's
Mhm.
your offer.
Mhm.
Then you could create a capsule podcast where you have guest speakers on that are experts in email, and it maybe you have it private so it's gated and they have to enter their email to access it, or you could post it publicly and use it as discovery content so they see that you exist and it's exactly about the topic that they care about at that moment. You can end that capsule with a bigger offer, like let's say you have a workshop or you have a webinar coming up, another way to bring in more leads with that offer. You can also choose to do playbooks, which you only have to produce once a quarter maybe. So
Mhm.
you can think about consistency in a different way where you just create little chunks of consistent content, maybe once a quarter or once a year if it was like a research report, and
Mhm.
then repurposing it for distribution.
Mhm.
So writing out that social media content and scheduling it out so you don't have to deal with it, you just batch it.
Right.
Writing out your, let's say, a monthly newsletter, that's
Mhm.
easy. It's just 12 emails. You could sit down in 2 days and write those, schedule them out.
Mhm.
So you could do consistency different. When you feel creative, that's your time. Just do it then.
Yeah, we were talking like there is creator guilt. So it's like, you have
Yeah.
the sense that when you're not you understand as a business owner how important content is and you're constantly wanting to connect with your audience or your customers and kind of get engage them. And I'm curious if someone has limited time and a limited size team, is there certain platforms or certain types of content that maybe they should focus on the most?
It depends on your audience. Everyone hates that
Gotcha.
answer, but
Yeah.
it depends on who your customer is.
Mhm.
So, when I'm working with a specific client, the first thing I do is a strategic spark where I have a workshop with all of their internal stakeholders. I interview their customers, and that's how I identify that the most streamlined marketing that you could get away with.
Mhm.
And that's how I identify what platform makes sense
Mhm.
and what core content makes sense for you to produce.
Mhm.
So your listeners could replicate this by doing a survey with their customers or their email subscribers and
Mhm.
figuring out what types of content they care about, what platforms they spend time on sales calls. They can do a little mini focus group on at the end of their sales goals. How did you find me? What platforms do you spend time on?
Mhm.
What are your core challenges? They could just make that part of the questions that they ask on a fit call or discovery call.
Mhm.
And that's an easy way to build the process of content strategy into what you're already doing.
Those are really great ideas that I think it sometimes can be so overwhelming that I love the idea that we can take some agency ourselves in learning how to create a strategy and learning how to find some data and information on what we should be focusing on. So I love that approach. So I think that you have some expertise in helping your clients create frameworks on what they should focus on in their content. So, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so on what they should focus on in their content, what
Mhm,
I usually talk about is like the Venn diagram of what you do, the
mhm,
challenges that your customers are facing, that
mhm,
thing in the middle, that is what your content should be about. So I like to go with just three pillars. What are three things that you help solve and your ideal customer has challenges with? And it
mhm,
doesn't have to be directly related to your offer, but aligned with it. Like
mhm,
if your customer doesn't have a lot of time,
mhm,
they're just really stretched thin, then and your offer happens to be a VIP day, like a
mhm.
VIP, that would be a great topic is how to save time in your business because it aligns with the way you work anyway and the
Mhm,
challenges that they have. But you should
mhm.
definitely have at least one pillar that's around what your offer is and not direct selling, but talking about the solution.
Gotcha. So, would the pillar be finding more time in your business?
The pillar itself would be like time management.
Timing. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you want it more overarching. So there's lots of little
Mhm,
topics in there that you can go
mhm,
with, but it
mhm,
aligns with the way you work. So it also
mhm.
helps sell.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach. And so how is it do you have a recommendation on how many offers? Do you also help your clients create offers based on, those pillars and, combining it with their content?
I don't help anyone come up with offers, but I do have rules of thumb on it.
Oh, okay. I'd love to hear that.
So I think that a core offer is important, having
Mhm.
that one thing that you're known for,
Mhm.
and then having a downsell and an upsell option for them.
Mhm.
So that would
Mhm.
be my recommendation. It's the easiest way to sell because you become known for that thing. And then if they can't
Mhm.
afford that thing, you have the downsell. Or if they
Gotcha.
need a little bit more, you have the upsell. But I like one core offer.
Okay. What are some examples of a core offer?
All right, I'll use myself as an example.
Okay.
So, my core offer is a strategic story. And
Mhm.
that's where well, it's called a strategic story sales saga.
Mhm.
So,
Uh-huh.
that's where I have the stakeholder interviews, customer interviews, and then I build out your whole strategy with the
Mhm.
customer avatar, messaging strategy, marketing strategy, and content strategy. And
Mhm.
it's all in one. And
Mhm.
then the sales saga element is all of those sales elements like your sales page, your sales email sequence,
Mhm.
and your lead magnet. So
Mhm.
those are the things that pretty much everybody needs when
Mhm.
they're starting off a new offer or they're relaunching their business, things like that. So that's my
Mhm.
core. Now, the downsell is the strategic story without the sales elements. So they could just do that. A
Mhm.
downsell from that is just the strategic spark session that I was telling
Mhm.
you about before,
Mhm.
where they get a marketing opportunity report and they could just run with it themselves. And that's just a 60 to 90-minute workshop, super
Mm.
downsell. And
Mm.
then the upsell is quarterly intensives where I execute all of your marketing for you.
Mhm.
So it's all related and
Mhm.
interlinked, but it's all along the same path and it gives opportunities for different price points.
I love that. So when you were describing that, I think that's so helpful. For somebody who's listening who may not know, I would think that they might be asking themselves, what's the difference between a marketing strategy and a content strategy?
So, the marketing strategy is everything. It's how everything is connected and how you get those sales.
Mhm.
So, within that is included lead magnets, events that you might want to attend.
Mhm.
And the content strategy, it's very interwoven with the
Right.
marketing, but it's those core pillars of content. What channels make sense? What
Mhm.
mediums your customer cares about?
Mhm.
Should you be creating articles or should you be creating podcasts?
Oh, I love that. I mean, it just seems like I'm getting a real sense of like how that kind of all weaves together. So, one of the ways too is that you like teach how we can 10x our content or our marketing efforts with a smaller team. So, how can we do that?
Yeah. So let's go with the example of, let's say you create a quarterly, no, even less. Let's say you create an annual report every year.
Hmm.
You run a survey with your ideal customers, and then you create a report, and that's your thing. That's your core content. But that report can be used in a million different ways. So you
Hmm.
can use that report to generate earned media and pitch it to different media publications to get
Hmm.
them to quote your report and link back to you. That's SEO juice right there.
Hmm.
You can repurpose different sections of that report into articles, and you can use that using, you can use AI for that and just
Hmm.
make sure that it sounds like your voice.
Hmm.
You can take certain topics and ask experts and influencers to add quotes to it. So then you can have them linking to your report because they have been mentioned in it. I I've done panels before where you pick a certain topic that was outlined in that report, and then you have a panel of experts that go into it and discuss their thoughts on what the results were of that report.
Hmm.
There are 1,000 ways you can repurpose it, but you're
Hmm.
only creating one core piece of content. So you don't
Hmm.
have to do any other research. You can
Hmm.
use that and break it down into 12 emails.
Hmm.
There's so much you can do with it.
Hmm. That's a really fascinating idea, which I have seen various, groups or people do in different industries, but I never thought about it myself. Like,
Yeah, it can totally work for you. You could do
yeah.
it with so many, like, let's say you created an annual virtual summit where you had 10 experts that share a masterclass with you. And then you
Hmm.
put it on a platform, make it available to everyone. Then you
Hmm.
can repurpose all of that and you get all the promotional power of those influencers who
Hmm.
shared their masterclass with you.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that a lot. And I see, so many creators doing like free summits, but you have to be there at a certain time, or you can do a VIP upgrade where you can
Hmm.
have the recordings and do all of that stuff. So we get so stuck in how we think about our marketing and our content, and that I think this conversation is great to really help us like open our eyes to just all of the possibilities that exist.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of, I just created a marketing opportunity quiz. I'll share it with you
Oh.
where you can put in all of the stuff that you're dealing with right now. Like, how many hours do I actually have to dedicate to marketing? And what
Mhm.
am I doing now? What does my team look like? And
Mhm.
it'll give you a report on what your hidden marketing opportunity is.
Mhm.
That's a great way
Mm.
to like
Wow.
start on figuring out what content would work for you.
That sounds like a very valuable quiz, because I think I would imagine that your clients say that too when they get your proposal or your reports. And are they too often surprised by, the opportunities that they never thought of?
Yeah, it has been a real game changer for these businesses because it's not like regurgitating what other people are doing or what your
Right.
competitors are doing.
Mhm.
It's building out a custom strategy based on what your stakeholders are saying and what your
Mhm.
customers are saying. There's no
Mhm.
guesswork here.
Mhm. Let's shift gears a little bit to email marketing. And, that's part of content marketing.
Mhm.
I myself get, I think oftentimes people think, especially when you're just starting out, email is so hard and we don't realize how valuable it is.
The money's made in email.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I try to make it one of the most important things. Like if I can't get to anything, I get to the email.
Smart. Yeah, that's smart.
So yeah, and it's not even that you're constantly trying to sell, but it's just such a way to personal way to nurture your audience.
Yeah, it's
Um,
relationship building.
can you give us some tips? Like, what do you advise people to incorporate into their email marketing strategy? I'm by no means an expert. So, yeah, what do you think our listeners need to know?
Yeah, email is my favorite.
Oh,
So start with a welcome sequence. And
yeah.
your welcome sequence only needs to be like 3 or 4 emails
Mm-hmm.
where the first one is giving away some sort of gift. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the lead magnet that they signed up for in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to introduce who you are, give them a little virtual tour like, hey, I create YouTube videos, subscribe here. So that would be in your second one. And then giving a little background on who you are and why you serve the people that you do and how your solution is different. That's all
Mm-hmm.
you really need in your sequence. And then just letting them know, like, this is how often I email you. This is what I
Mm-hmm.
talk about. Just like
Mm-hmm.
indoctrinating them to
Mm-hmm.
who you are and their experience with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then move into your nurture sequence, which could be a weekly or a monthly newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sales sequence, which there's 2 different ways to go about it. You could do a condensed sales sequence, which would come after a specific event that you held, or a lead magnet, if it was like a bottom of funnel type of lead magnet. And then that would be about 7 emails usually
Mm-hmm.
that walk people through what their challenges are, what objections they might have to your offer, introducing the offer, all of
Mm-hmm.
that jazz. I have a
Mm-hmm.
whole framework for that.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could do an evergreen version of that where you send it you could also do both, where you send it out like one sales email a month, just addressing an objection that you might have or a challenge that they're experiencing and then connecting that to your offer. So that's
So
generally how I do it.
those one-off kind of sales emails, like let's say if you had, would that be like connected to maybe, I don't know, a quarterly, I don't know, workbook or review or something that it wouldn't be
Like a
something,
specific offer.
yeah.
Um, the evergreen, not necessarily. The
Uh-huh.
evergreen would probably be would make more sense to be tied to your core offer
Oh, gotcha.
because that's going
Okay,
out pretty consistently.
gotcha.
But I can see the condensed 7-part sales sequence
Mm-hmm.
going towards a specific offer.
Gotcha.
Like if you're doing a quarter, like you want to jumpstart your sales so you have a bunch of money for Christmas. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a very specific offer that's maybe a VIP day or some sort of condensed quick project that would be easy to sell. That would be a great one to go with the condensed version.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about the misconception that we have to be consistent all the time and like the strict vision of like what consistency means. But do you have any tips for trying to stay consistent and kind of the message that we deliver by being consistent with our customer? Because I think sometimes we just put all this pressure on ourselves, but we don't look at it from maybe the customer's viewpoint. We just kind of see the pressure.
Yeah, I think I think consistency is important,
Hmm.
but the way you're consistent doesn't need to be what you traditionally think of it. Your
Hmm.
customer, it's important that you stay in front of your ideal customer and keep them reminding them that you exist and you solve this problem. But you don't have to be there all the time. Like
Hmm.
I'm not going to be on Instagram all the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
I just commit to doing, I'm going to post at least once a week to LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I'm going to post, or for me, my emails are once a week. I will always do that. My
Mm-hmm.
podcast every other week. I will always do that. Just stick to a specific schedule, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be crazy. Like, I'm going to post every day to social media.
Mm-hmm.
You can, if you do even once a quarter emails, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you do the quarterly podcast capsules that we talked about, or you do an
Mm-hmm.
annual report. If
Mm-hmm.
you just commit to doing something
Mm-hmm.
consistently, even if it's spread apart and it's
Mm-hmm.
not all the time, that is okay.
Mm-hmm. I love that because I think, I've seen various recommendations of doing 3 stories, Instagram stories a day, and
Yeah, I'm
making
not going
sure
to do
you
that.
do 3 reels and 2 carousels and
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't have the time to do it, and I don't care enough about
right.
it to do it. I always say just make a schedule and commit to it.
Right.
And you can always batch it. Like for
Mhm.
myself, I go through a roller coaster of creativity. Sometimes I'm
Mhm.
feeling super creative and I'm ready
Mhm.
to produce content. And other
Mhm.
times I'm like, I just want to watch paranormal caught on camera and answer emails from my couch.
Mhm.
But if I create all of that content I need to in those creative
Mhm.
highs
Mhm.
and schedule it out for the rest of the time, that
Mhm.
is perfectly fine.
I love that because you just gave listeners permission to quit chasing all of the recommendations. There's always somebody telling you how to do it this way and not that way. And it can feel so overwhelming
Yeah.
that we forget to focus on what works for us. And I'm sure there's an element of proof in whatever they're suggesting that it might work for them or their clients, but there's not always a strategy that works for everybody. you
No,
know?
I mean, it might make you grow faster if you can
Mhm.
actually do that. But
Mhm.
the reality of it is, if you put these high expectations on yourself, you're
Mhm.
gonna burn out and
Mhm.
you're going to stop doing it. You're not going
Mhm.
to stay consistent. But
Mhm.
if you make realistic expectations and a schedule that
Mhm.
you can handle and you know you can handle,
Mhm.
you're going to be a lot more successful.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely in the long term, which I think we should all be trying to
Yeah,
achieve.
it's all great if you get 1,000 new followers in 1 week, but
Mhm.
like if that burned you out because you had to do so much work to do that
Yeah.
and then you stop showing up,
Mhm.
what was the point?
I know. I just wow, it's like it's a lot. There is a lot of pressure, and I do hear from a lot of other mom entrepreneurs that they just feel like really kind of frozen by that, expectations that they kind of put on themselves because of all of the sources of information. And of course, the algorithm picks up. If you're looking up
Yeah.
any
Yeah, then it's
strategy,
showing
you're
you
going to
more
get woo.
strategies. I know. That happened to me recently, and I was like, now I'm overwhelmed. And I don't know what to follow.
Right? You turn on the fire hose.
Yeah. You know what I always say is start with the bare minimum and make
Uh-huh.
that your schedule. And as you get more comfortable and you like know what you really can handle, then you can
Hmm.
adjust.
Hmm.
But the bare minimum is fine.
Yeah. No, I love that you just gave people permission to do that. So now let's talk about the pressure that we put on ourselves to constantly, when you kind of talked about it a little bit already, but we're constantly putting pressure on ourselves to create new content. But I myself am totally bad at this, not repurposing the content we've already spent all of this
Yeah.
time creating. It's like, so yeah, can you give us some ideas and ways that we can repurpose content to make it easier on ourselves?
Yeah, I live off of repurposed content. I can tell you a lot of ways to do that. So we already dove into like how to do that with a research report. So let's just
Yeah.
reverse it. Let's
Hmm.
look at micro content and how you can make that or repurpose that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was telling you before we were recording that I am active on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do is post on LinkedIn. It's what, 300 characters, and see the engagement that I'm getting. The most engaged with posts, the things that people are responding to, that can be repurposed up. It's like testing out content. So
Mm-hmm.
people really resonated with this specific topic. So then maybe I'll do a video on it or a podcast episode or a
Mm-hmm.
blog. So you
Mm-hmm.
can repurpose up, and you can also just take that social media post and turn it into an email pretty easily.
Ah.
Now, let's say you have a podcast
Mm-hmm.
and you have already committed, you do it once a week, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But you can repurpose that with AI so easily. Like I use Toasty AI for that, and
Mm-hmm.
all I have to do is upload my WAV file or put in the link to iTunes, and it'll create all of my social media posts, all of an article that is already in my voice because it listens to the podcast episode
Uh-huh.
and replicates my voice.
Mm-hmm.
So you can repurpose super easily that way too.
Mm-hmm.
And then for myself, I use video a lot when I'm doing my podcast recordings.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a video editor on my team, and she repurposes that video for YouTube podcasts. And then she creates shorts and reels from all of
Mm-hmm.
those episodes. I don't have to do anything. She edits it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also use tools like Opus, that where you drop that video in and it'll turn them into shorts and reels for you. It'll take
Yeah.
the most interesting hooks in there.
I love Opus. It's like saved me so much time. I
It's
actually used to
insane.
go through the video and look for like the most like important like
Yeah.
it took forever. It was ridiculous. So when I found Opus, I was like, yes.
I know. My video editor actually told me about Opus. So when I like her work more, and I get like 10 times the views when she does it over AI. But when I'm running behind and I need to
Yeah.
do it quickly, I toss into
Hmm.
Opus, and it does a beautiful job.
Yeah, it really does. And you can put in keywords and you can tell them the length of the clips that you want, and you can directly share to social sites. So it's amazing.
Yes. Oh, and you can put in like your brand guidelines. So it'll use
Yeah.
the colors and the fonts that you use.
Yeah. You can, I put a little logo on there and it's great. It's
It
like
is great.
saves me so much time. And so are there any other ways? I'm a huge proponent of AI, and if I meet anybody who's not using it, I'm like,
You're like, why?
what are you? Well, you know what? I keep hearing this argument that like they think they're going to be found out, or it's like,
Well, the thing, I mean, I can see that if
yeah.
the AI is your core content or you're not
Hmm.
making any adjustments to it.
Hmm.
But like the examples we used, you created the core content yourself. It's your
Hmm.
podcast or your
Hmm.
video.
Hmm.
And if, let's say, your core content is an article, a guide, something written, and you use just AI,
Hmm.
then I can see that argument being a good point. But
Hmm.
if you use it as a first draft and then you interview influencers to include their quotes in,
Hmm.
and you change the intro and the outro, and you add personal stories,
Hmm.
it's a great first draft, but you need to
Hmm.
add more if you want to make it valuable.
Right. And that's just it. It just saves so much mental energy to get you kind of started and
Yeah.
find some momentum.
That
That
blinking cursor's gone. That
right.
empty
Yeah,
page.
absolutely. I mean, to have once had to think of content ideas, titles, show notes, doing all of that writing and emails and everything all on your own, it was mentally exhausting. And
Yeah.
it just like you said, I don't think anybody would suggest you take just what AI spits out and send that out or
Yeah,
use
call it a
that
day.
verbatim. but you know, it can be just such a game changer. It can be like having, at least another person on your team.
100% with you. I like
Mhm.
to use AI also as like a critique partner. I'll write
Oh.
the copy for a sales page
Mhm.
ahead of time, and then I'll train ChatGPT about the formula that I'm using, copy
Mhm.
and paste it in, and ask it to grade it. So it'll tell me what I'm doing right, what I should
Oh,
add to make it more effective. So that's
I
a
have
great way to use
never
it
heard
too.
that. I watched so much and then kind of ingested as much as I can on ways to use it. I've never heard that before. That's
I'm gonna have
really
to make some content on that idea
I
then.
know. I've never heard that before. Yeah, so are there any other ways that we maybe could be using AI that we're not?
So earlier we were talking about interviewing customers.
Mhm.
One thing that I use AI for is taking the transcripts from those interviews,
Mhm.
copy and pasting them into chat, and then asking them to give me the most valuable points. What is it that they found to be the biggest challenge based off of this transcript? And that saves up buckets of time.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll load like show notes and be like, "Okay, give me this, that," It's like
Ooh, that's a good idea too. You could take the transcripts from your podcast,
Mhm.
put it into chat, and then ask them to what were the resources that were mentioned, which is
Mhm.
always so hard to keep track of.
Oh, I know,
And
right?
what were the biggest takeaways from this
Mhm.
episode? And
Yep,
that
I
can
do
really
that.
elevate your show notes.
Mhm. Yeah, I do things like that and I'll say, give me 5 suggested titles. Sometimes if I'm struggling with a title and then I'll kind of like put them together and then,
Yeah,
do some SEO research and so yeah, I mean it's so much help. It's so anybody listening to this who is, on the sidelines about it, the smartest people, the most savvy people are using it, not relying it on 100%, but it can really make your life so much easier. So, I don't know, is there anything about content marketing that, we didn't cover that you're thinking you'd like to share?
that we haven't touched on. I
I
don't
know
know.
we
We've
kind
covered
of
a
touched on
lot.
a lot. Yeah.
um, okay, I'll touch on one more thing.
Okay.
If we were to look at content from like a campaign or a capsule perspective,
Mhm.
I would have it around the lead magnet that you are offering that quarter or that year. So you create content that would lead people to that lead magnet to increase your subscribers. So connecting the dots wherever you could,
Mhm.
content to lead magnet to offer. So it's really easy to sell and it's selling for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, the simpler message, if you got a lot going on, I think it can also be really confusing too. So making it kind of cohesive and all kind of make sense together, I think is wise.
Yeah, think about it like a campaign. So it doesn't
Mhm.
feel so overwhelming. It's just like a project that you're dealing
Mhm.
with.
Mhm.
And you could do it all at one time and schedule it out. And it's a lot less overwhelming when you think about it like a campaign.
Mhm. No, I love that. Yep. So, if you want listeners to take away anything about our conversation today, you want one thing to stick, what would that be?
Pick your timing and stick to it. Pick that
Mhm.
schedule that you feel comfortable with and that core content you feel comfortable with, and just go with it and go with the bare minimum when you're first starting out. You
Mhm.
can always move up. But if you drop off without notice to your customers, they're going to wonder what happened. They're going to forget you exist.
Yeah, that's definitely there's so much momentum when you're first starting, I think that you want to try and do it all and there's so much information out there and object syndrome is
Yeah, pick one thing. Pick one thing,
right.
honestly. That's like the biggest problem that I see is, well, we have to
Mhm.
be on every channel. We have to create all of the content. You don't. You
Yeah.
just pick one channel, pick one type of content and just
Mhm.
be comfortable with that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, We're just now gearing up to getting our YouTube channel started. I wish I would have kind of done it in the beginning because we've now got a lot of backlog to do. But
Yeah, that's hard.
I mean, I don't think my brain could have handled it.
Yeah, I got that. I've had my channel for a long time because my podcast
Mhm.
started off as a live stream show, but I still have to restructure a ton of it since YouTube started YouTube podcasts.
Mhm.
So I
Oh,
have a
yes.
bunch of backlog too.
Oh, yeah. So, we'll get there, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that I didn't overwhelm myself more. I think I would have short circuited.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, yeah, too. And so we were talking, this is going to be one of the first episodes out in January of 2024. Are there any things that we can start off the new year? Kind of, I love the new year. It's a fresh slate. It's like
Yeah.
a new beginning.
Yes. Let's see. Well, a lot of small businesses avoid this that every big business does, but annual planning, like plan out your year
Yeah.
and what content you want or what offer you're going to be doing each
Mm-hmm.
quarter if your job is seasonal
Mm-hmm.
and plan your content around that. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be complicated. Just
Mm-hmm.
what's your offer, plan your content, and
Mm-hmm.
then batch it when you're feeling your most creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that that's great because we put our pressure on ourselves to create content all the time and to be creative all the time. But I don't know if anybody ever feels creative all the time.
Yeah.
So just being aware of, okay, here's when I feel more creative and, take advantage of it and batch your work and plan and think about it and all of those good things. So,
I'm
um,
definitely a cycle person where I'm like up and
yeah.
down, up and down. I'm like the
Oh, yeah.
moon, and I need to
Oh
be in
yeah,
a
yeah. We've had an
phase for my career.
astrologer on that's talked about like I don't care if you don't think anything of astrology, but it clearly affects the tides and we are made up of so much
80%
water.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whether you think it or not, you are affected by, the cycles of the moon and all these things. So that's
Well, and as
absolutely
women, the
true.
cycles of our bodies.
Right, exactly.
Every
And
week, our body is in a different state of hormones.
right. And I recently read where men typically are on like a 24-hour cycle. Like
Really?
that's what their cycle is. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I can't even fathom that. I'm
Right.
quite used to my weekly cycle.
Yeah. So that, yeah, hormonally, I guess that's how they are. So, you know, but yeah, and I mean, I'm big on talking about how oftentimes we see kind of this male example of how we should run our businesses and kind of do things and put down our individual feminine strengths and what works for what has probably been your example of how to conduct business and run your business and do things might necessarily feel authentic or be what really works for you. So
That is really true. I follow a lot of people and it's always women that I'm most drawn to on their frameworks and systems
mhm,
because they do seem we we don't work exactly the same and
yeah.
they get it.
Yeah, and we're not man bashing, but I think it's really important if like we talked about, we're looking at the longevity of our businesses and wanting to serve our clients and especially for someone like me who appeals to women.
Well, everybody listening to this show is a mom business
Right.
owner.
Right.
So we understand each other. We understand
Right.
that
Exactly.
we have to have our attention divided a
Mhm.
lot of the time,
Mhm.
and that isn't the experience for everybody.
No, it's definitely not. So Yeah. Well, thank you for all of the amazing tips and wisdom. And you seem to just really kind of streamline how we can think about creating content and approaches that we can take to be more consistent and, hopefully use less resources if that's where we are in our
Yeah.
business. So I love
Yeah.
that. Efficiency, no matter the size of your business, is always important. So yeah, where can listeners tune into the podcast? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah. So you can go to sarahnoelblock.com/podcast, and that will take you to just everything that you need to find me. And then my show is called Tiny Marketing, and that it's everywhere.
I love that. That's such a great name.
Thank you.
So yeah, I love it. I will definitely connect with you. Thanks so much for
Thank you.
joining us today and sharing all of this. And I'm sure that listeners had some takeaways that are gonna help them in their businesses. So thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to another empowering episode of the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast with our incredible guest, Sarah Noel Block. I hope you found inspiration and lots of actionable insights to elevate your mompreneur journey in this episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us. And hey, share this episode with fellow mompreneurs who can use a boost in their business game. Connect with Sarah Noel Block at sarahnoelblock.com and catch her on the Tiny Marketing Podcast for even more valuable nuggets. I'm going to leave links to connect with her in the show notes as well. Remember, you're not just good enough, you're fantastic. Keep building, keep growing, and until next time, here's to thriving in both motherhood and entrepreneurship. Stay tuned for more incredible guests and wisdom on the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. I'm your host, Angela Mishuli, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Bye.